It's going everywhere. So nobody got wrong.
The invitation went out, and someone noticed a missing word. It was spring 2023. The cards for King Charles III's coronation were being printed, sealed, and mailed to 2,000 guests. Heavy paper, gold lettering. The kind of objects people keep in a drawer for 50 years. And on that card, beside the king's name, was his wife's. But the word that should have followed her name was gone. The card did not say Queen Consort. It said Queen Camilla. Just that. 2 words where, for months, there had been 3. In royal reporting, 3 words had become 2, and almost nobody had been told why. The press caught it within hours. Reporters who had spent 18 years writing the careful phrase Queen Consort suddenly had to ask whether they were still allowed to. Buckingham Palace did not send a memo. There was no statement, no briefing, no explanation. The word simply stopped appearing. Hi viewers, before this story goes any deeper, be honest in the comments. If you married into a family that spent 20 years telling the world what you could and couldn't be called, would you stay quiet or would you fight for the title? Tell me below. I read every single one. Because here is what made that missing word matter. It was not a typo. It was the end of a fight that had lasted almost 2 decades. A fight that started on the day Camilla married Charles in 2005, when the palace promised the public she would never be called queen at all. That promise had a specific name. Princess Consort. A title that, as royal historians point out, had no real precedent in British history, invented essentially to solve a problem the monarchy did not want to say out loud. The problem was Diana. Camilla had married into a family still holding its breath about a woman who had been dead for 8 years.
A lot of food as well. Yeah, so
How much do I put in?
No, that's fine. We send throughout Ramadan one more. Yes. Yes.
Diana, Princess of Wales, had told a television audience of millions that there were 3 people in her marriage. Everyone watching knew who the third person was. And now that third person was standing at the altar, marrying the future king. And the palace had to find language that would let her in without setting the public on fire. So they built a smaller word for her. They told the country she would be a princess, not a queen. They said it was her own wish. They repeated it for years, in statement after statement, until it sounded like settled fact. And then, one invitation at a time, they took it back. The question reporters started asking in 2023 was simple, and it had no easy answer. If Camilla was always going to be queen, fully, plainly, no qualifier, then why had they spent 18 years promising she wouldn't be? Who decided the promise no longer applied? And what did it cost, behind palace doors, to quietly erase a word the whole world had been taught to say? The answer started long before the coronation. It started on a wedding day that the Queen of England refused to attend. April 9th, 2005. The bride was marrying the heir to the throne, and his mother was not in the building. Queen Elizabeth II skipped the civil ceremony at Windsor Guildhall. As head of the Church of England, she had decided it was not appropriate for her to attend the marriage of 2 divorced people in a registry office. She came later to the blessing at St George's Chapel. But the message in that absence was loud, and reporters heard it clearly. The monarchy was letting this marriage happen, not celebrating it. The wedding itself had already been delayed a day, so Charles could attend the funeral of Pope John Paul II. Bad luck stacked on bad timing. And underneath all of it ran the question nobody could escape. What would this woman be called? Technically, the answer was already extraordinary. The moment Camilla married Charles, she legally became the Princess of Wales, Diana's title. The exact words that, for millions of people, belonged to one woman and one woman only. Camilla never used them. She announced she would be styled the Duchess of Cornwall instead, taking one of Charles's lesser titles, rather than wearing the name that still carried Diana's ghost. That was the first quiet retreat. There would be more, because Clarence House had already made a second, bigger promise. In the announcement of the engagement, palace officials stated that when Charles became king, Camilla would not be queen. She would be called Princess Consort. Royal commentators have pointed out for years that this was a strange invention. There was no British history of a princess consort. The closest thing was Prince Consort, used exactly once for Queen Victoria's husband Albert. The female version did not exist. The palace essentially created a title to manage public feeling, not to follow tradition. And the reasons, according to reports at the time, were specific. There was concern for Diana's sons, William and Harry. There was the raw public memory of the affair. There was a sense that Queen Camilla was a phrase the country was not ready to hear and might never be. So they shrank the title to fit the politics. Princess, not Queen. A word chosen to make her smaller on purpose, so the public could accept her at all. For years it held, the palace repeated it, the press recorded it, the promise calcified into something that looked permanent. But promises made to calm a crowd have a way of expiring once the crowd calms down. And somewhere inside the palace, someone was already counting the years until the line could quietly be redrawn. The shift did not come from Camilla, it came from the one person in Britain no one could argue with. February 5th, 2022. The eve of Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee, 70 years on the throne, a milestone no British monarch had ever reached. The country expected a warm message of thanks. They got that. But buried inside, it was a sentence that rewrote 18 years of palace policy in a single line. The Queen wrote that it was her sincere wish that, when the time came, Camilla be known as Queen Consort, not Princess Consort, Queen Consort, the exact title the palace had spent nearly 2 decades insisting she would never hold. Royal correspondents understood instantly what had happened. As one former BBC royal correspondent put it, the journey from being the third person in a marriage to Queen-in-waiting was now complete. The monarch herself had settled the argument. After this, no one inside the family could object, because objecting meant contradicting the Queen's own dying-era wish. The timing was deliberate. Elizabeth chose the most powerful moment of her reign, 70 years the whole nation watching, to spend a piece of that authority on her son's wife. She was using the weight of the Jubilee to push Camilla over a line the palace had drawn in 2005. Charles responded the next day. In his own Jubilee statement, he said he and Camilla were deeply conscious of the honour his mother had bestowed. He thanked her. What he pointedly did not do was confirm whether Camilla would actually accept the title. Even then, with the Queen's blessing in hand, the family kept one careful step of distance. Why the hesitation? Because the public memory had not vanished.
Finally together, from Kisley are taking third position. Behind those, put your hands together, Ismahan is next. Tinto continues to make progress, a very pale jacket 4 from the running well. Barnso behind those.
Commentators noted that even with the Queen's endorsement, the legacy of Diana still shadowed every mention of Camilla's name. The endorsement could sway opinion. It could not erase history. But the endorsement did something the palace could not undo. It converted a soft promise, Princess Consort, into a soft target. Now the smaller title was the thing standing in the way of the Queen's stated wish. And the monarchy does not, in the end, leave the Queen's wishes unfulfilled. 7 months later, Elizabeth was gone, and the question of what to call Camilla stopped being a someday problem. It became a right-now decision, and the clock had already started. September 8th, 2022. The Queen died at Balmoral, and within hours Camilla had a title she was never supposed to have. The moment Charles became king, his wife became Queen Consort. Automatically. By the same custom that had made Alexandra a queen in 1901 and Mary a queen in 1910. The wife of a reigning king becomes queen, full stop, unless someone builds a special exception. In 2005, the palace had tried to build that exception with the words Princess Consort. In 2022, they simply let it fall away. There was no announcement that Camilla would be Queen Consort. There didn't need to be. The Queen's Jubilee message had already cleared the path, and the ancient default did the rest. 18 years of Princess Consort ended not with a statement, but with a death, and with silence where an objection used to be. For 7 months the title held in that form, Queen Consort. The word consort doing quiet work, signalling that she was queen by marriage, not a queen who reigned. It was the compromise made visible. She had the rank. The qualifier reminded everyone how she got it. Then came the invitation. When the coronation cards were printed in spring 2023, the palace dropped consort entirely. She was Queen Camilla now. Royal experts reading the change called it the final step in a long process, the last of the 2005 restrictions being quietly undone. One historian described it as a slow burn that would finally be righted when the crown was placed on her head. That word, righted, tells the whole story. To the people closest to the monarchy, the smaller titles had always been a temporary fix, a piece of crisis management from a more nervous era. The real plan, the thing Charles had wanted from the start, was simply Queen. The public reaction split exactly where you'd expect. British commentators tended to frame it as a natural correction, the ending of an awkward arrangement. International audiences, especially in America, saw a sharper story. A mistress who outlasted a princess and claimed her crown anyway. Both readings were watching the same 2 words disappear off the same gold card. And on May 6th, 2023, the disappearing act was complete. Camilla walked into Westminster Abbey, and a crown was lowered onto her head. The palace said nothing to explain it, and the silence was the loudest part. There was no press conference about the dropped word. No official walked out to tell the country why the promise made in 2005 no longer applied in 2023. The monarchy let the change happen the way it lets most things happen. Through repetition, through omission, through what it chooses to stop saying. As royal observers have long noted, silence from the palace is rarely an accident. It is a tool. Camilla was crowned queen on May 6th, 2023, in the same ceremony as her husband. She was anointed. She wore Queen Mary's crown. She was not styled consort on the day, not in the programme, not in the official language. The qualifier that had defined her role for 7 months was simply absent, and no one explained where it had gone. What made the silence work was that the public was, by then, mostly ready for it. The woman who had entered royal life as the most disliked figure in the family had spent nearly 20 years rebuilding her image, appearing reliable, low drama, loyal to a king who clearly depended on her. Her approval numbers had climbed. The country that once couldn't stomach Queen Camilla had slowly stopped flinching at it. But mostly ready is not the same as fully reconciled. Commentators kept circling back to the same unfinished business, Diana. The accounts describe it bluntly. Decades after her death, the legacy of the Princess of Wales still trailed every step of Camilla's rise. The crown could be placed, the word could be dropped. The ghost stayed in the room. That is the part the palace could never manage with a printed invitation. They could control the title. They could control the timing. They could control which words appeared on which card. What they could not control was the memory of a woman who had told the world, on camera, that she had been outnumbered in her own marriage. So the monarchy did what it does best. It moved the language forward and let the past go unspoken, trusting that a confident silence would eventually pass for a closed case. But a question doesn't close just because no one will answer it. And one person inside the family had never stopped carrying Diana's side of the story, a son who watched his mother's title get handed to the woman she'd named, and who was now the future of the throne himself. What William did with that inheritance was about to become the next chapter the palace couldn't script. He was the son who watched his mother lose the title, and now he was the one deciding what came next. Prince William, Prince of Wales, inherited more than a future throne when his grandmother died. He inherited a name his mother had worn. Prince of Wales, Princess of Wales, the same set of titles that had once sat at the centre of the most public marriage breakdown in modern royal history. Catherine became Princess of Wales in September 2022, stepping into the styling Diana had made famous and then made tragic. Royal commentators have noted the weight of that handover for years. William is not just the heir, he is Diana's son, raised inside the same institution that, in the public's mind, had failed her. Every choice he makes about openness, about family, about how the monarchy presents itself, gets read through that history. If you've ever had to make peace with a family decision you didn't agree with, drop a word in the comments that describes how it felt. And if these royal breakdowns keep you watching, subscribe and turn on notifications. The next story is one you won't want to miss. The contrast inside the family was hard to miss. As Camilla's title grew larger, William and Catherine were being positioned by palace messaging as the stable, modern centre of the monarchy's future. From a public relations standpoint, royal analysts suggest the institution leaned on that contrast on purpose, the steady young couple balancing out the older, more complicated story of Charles and Camilla. And then there was Harry. According to reports widely circulated in the British press, the relationship between William and his brother had broken down badly. Harry's own published account described arguments, distance, and a family he felt had closed ranks against him and his wife. Whatever the full truth, the public picture was of two brothers, Diana's two boys, pulled to opposite ends of the institution she had once tried to soften. That fracture mattered to the title story, because it kept Diana's memory alive in the headlines at the exact moment Camilla was being elevated. Every time the brothers' rift made news, the original wound reopened. So, the question hanging over the new Prince of Wales was sharp. William now held the power to shape the monarchy his mother never lived to see. Would he protect the careful silence the palace had built around Camilla's rise? Or did he have reasons of his own to leave certain things unspoken? Nothing in royal life moves by accident, and people who study it started counting the small things. The order people are introduced, where they sit, whose name comes first in an official caption. Royal watchers treat these details as a code because inside the monarchy, placement signals rank and rank signals power. As biographers have long argued, the institution rarely changes a detail of protocol without a reason, even when it refuses to name the reason out loud. So when Camilla's styling shifted from Queen Consort to simply Queen, the people who track this language treated it as a real event, not a clerical edit. The qualifier hadn't fallen off by chance. Someone had decided the country was ready to stop hearing it. From a public relations standpoint, royal analysts suggest the change was managed the way the palace manages most sensitive things, gradually, quietly, with no single moment anyone could point to and protest. There was no day the word was officially banned. There was just less of it, and then none of it. That method has a name among royal observers. They call it narrative control. The monarchy shapes what the public believes not by arguing, but by repeating, and by choosing what to stop repeating. A title said often enough becomes fact. A title quietly dropped becomes history. The British press and the international press read the same moves and reached different verdicts. UK commentators tended to describe a natural, overdue correction. American coverage in particular framed it as something closer to a power play, a woman once cast as the villain of the Diana story, claiming the highest title available to her. Both sides were watching real events. The disagreement was about meaning, not facts, and meaning in the royal world is the entire battlefield. What neither side could fully explain was the part the palace kept off stage. The accounts agree on the events, the 2005 promise, the 2022 endorsement, the 2023 crown. What they can't agree on is the cost. Who inside the family had to swallow the change? Who, if anyone, objected before the door closed? The palace wasn't telling, and the absence of an answer was about to become the story itself. The official line was that everything was fine, and that was exactly what people stopped believing. Buckingham Palace's posture through the entire title transition was consistency by silence, no drama acknowledged, no internal debate confirmed. The message, in effect, was that Camilla had always been heading toward Queen, that the smaller titles were a temporary courtesy, and that there was nothing more to discuss. But the public had 2 decades of palace statements on record saying the opposite. For 18 years, royal officials had insisted Camilla intended to be princess consort. That was the documented position. So, when it vanished, the gap between what the palace had said and what the palace now did became impossible to ignore. Royal biographers have long debated how much of the original princess consort plan was ever real. Some argue it was always a holding pattern, a way to get Camilla through the door while public anger about Diana cooled, with the full intention of upgrading her later. Others believe the plan was genuine in 2005 and only changed as Camilla won the country over. The honest answer is that no one outside the family's inner circle knows for certain. That uncertainty is where the controversy lives. While the palace officially treats the matter as settled, experts point out that a promise repeated for 18 years and then dropped without explanation does not simply close. It lingers as a question about trust, about whether the public was ever told the truth about the plan, or only told what would keep them calm. And underneath all of it, always, sat the comparison no statement could erase. Camilla now held a version of the very rank Diana once held. The woman Diana had named as the 3rd person in her marriage was now queen. According to accounts that have circulated for years, that contrast is the thing the monarchy has never been able to fully resolve, no matter how carefully it manages the language. The institution had won the title fight. Camilla was queen plainly with no qualifier, but winning the words is not the same as winning the meaning, and the one person who could speak to that meaning with more authority than anyone alive had so far chosen to say almost nothing at all. The future of the monarchy now rested on a man who had every reason to stay quiet and every reason not to. King Charles III's reign is, by its nature, a bridge. He came to the throne in his 70s, after the longest wait of any heir in British history. Royal analysts describe his era as a transition reign, a handoff period, holding the line until William takes over. That framing puts enormous weight on the Prince of Wales, because the monarchy's real future is measured in his decades, not his father's, and William's inheritance comes wrapped in his mother's story. He is the modernizer, the anchor the palace points to when it wants to signal that the institution has a stable tomorrow. Catherine, Princess of Wales, stands beside him in the title Diana once carried. Together they are presented as proof that the monarchy survived its hardest chapter. But proof of survival is not the same as resolution. Royal biographers have long debated what Diana would have made of all this. The title she held passing forward, the woman she named rising to queen, her 2 sons split apart in public view. There is no answer, because Diana left no public verdict on a future she didn't live to see. What the accounts make clear is that her legacy still interrupts the monarchy's preferred story. Every time the institution tries to present a clean, modern, united front, the Diana question surfaces again, in the brothers' rift, in the comparisons to Camilla, in the public's long memory. The monarchy has survived by controlling narrative continuity, as historians put it. Diana's memory is the thing that keeps breaking that continuity. So the titles were never just honorifics, they were tools in a long project of managing how the public remembers. Queen Consort became Queen. Duchess of Cornwall, decades earlier, was chosen over Princess of Wales. Each choice was a sentence in a story the palace was carefully writing. The most important question was never really what changed. It was who benefits when the public stops asking. And the next move belonged to William, the son who could honour the silence or break it. In the end, the loudest thing in the whole story was a word that simply stopped being said. Camilla is queen. That part is settled, official, carved into the record by a coronation in Westminster Abbey on May 6, 2023. The promise of Princess Consort, repeated by the palace for 18 years, is gone. Not denied, not explained, just quietly retired. The journey royal correspondents once described, from the 3rd person in a marriage to a crown, is complete. But completion is not the same as closure. The palace closed the title question. It never closed the question underneath it. Royal biographers continue to debate why the original plan was made, why it was abandoned, and what the public was really being told along the way. While officials treat the matter as finished, experts point out that the silence around it is doing work, holding back a story the institution would rather not relive. The monarchy has always understood that some things are managed best by what is no longer repeated. Drop a word from an invitation. Let an old promise fade. Trust that a confident quiet will, in time, pass for an answer. According to accounts that have followed this family for decades, that is exactly how the institution survives, by controlling not just what is said, but what is allowed to be forgotten. Yet, Diana's voice, whether written, remembered, or simply imagined by a public that never let her go, keeps interrupting the story the palace wants to tell. Her sons carry it in opposite directions. Her old title now sits on her son's wife. The woman she once named now wears a crown. None of that has been resolved. It has only been styled, arranged, and quietly moved past. So the thread stays open. The monarchy stands stable in public and unsettled underneath. And the next royal appearance, the next caption, the next missing or added word will tell the watchers whether this was ever truly over, or just carefully, deliberately set aside. If this story held you, you already know the rule of this channel. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and don't miss what comes next. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your take might be the one that makes someone else see the whole story differently. Because in the royal world, the question is never really closed. It's just waiting for the next person brave enough to ask it out loud.